Hi everyone, how are we all doing? I hope we're doing well, that the weather's good or, all that. So, today we're going to have a little look at snippets. It was a request in one of our YouTube comments from the last video. So, if you want me to focus on other features in the future, leave a comment down below and, like the video and all that. But today we're going to focus on exploring snippets and how to make the most out of them in your workflow. They are absolutely not just for notes to self. There's so much you can do with them. And I think kind of the name is sometimes a little bit misleading. So yeah, we're just going to dive in, use my sample novel to kind of show bits of how I've been using them in practice, kind of get a general vibe. And if you guys want to share how you use snippets, that would also be awesome. We can share them with the group, keep things going. Yeah, if you're watching on replay, leave them in the comments how you use snippets, because it's seriously really useful for everyone to get these tips to help each other and, develop our workflows. I think snippets is something that is so easy to overlook. So it's going to be a good one. Good morning, Mitchell, Joseph, RVT, and Nikki. So yeah. So what we're going to look at today, we're going to look at what is a snippet, how to make a snippet, where you can use snippets, and then seven different use cases. So if you want a spoiler, and eventually we're going to put timestamps in, but we're going to do kitbashing, brain dump, research hub, cutting room floor, checklist, in-world artifacts, and cross-book references. They're the kind of the seven main ways when I was kind of brainstorming for this, I was like, that I think could be used. And obviously each of these can be adapted. There will be a lot of stuff within that. But yeah, brain dumps are a huge part of what you can do with them and a really useful way of doing it. So what is a snippet? So when I went to good old Google and I was like, what is a snippet? It was like a small piece or a brief extract. And I was like, right, okay. So a Novelcrafter snippet can do so much more than that. I mean, you can put a brief piece of information in it, but you can also do a whole lot more. A better way of thinking of snippets in Novelcrafter is snippets are like documents. I'm going to move my head, I think, because I'm kind of in the way. There. That should be better. So yeah, the previous slide was like, there. A Novelcrafter snippet can do so much more. So think of snippets as documents. You can format them in the same ways as you can in the manuscript. So you can underline, bold, italicize, you can use headings, bullet points. Whilst you can't use AI in a snippet, all the formatting stuff is there. You can use snippets in the full screen, so you can have them as your the main interface, so you can focus on just what you're doing. But you can also pin them to the side and have multiple snippets pinned. So if you're researching or writing, you can have your notes alongside your kind of current draft. So there's a lot of areas where you can use them, and they're not limited by length. You can scroll down them. You can, separate through headings and quick find those headings, which we'll go into in a bit. But there's a lot of scope for the use of them. Yeah. So to create a snippet, there are two main ways. If you have absolutely nothing in your novel, as in if you have no scenes in your novel, you can create it from the write interface. So you just click on write and this screen appears and you can either add your first scene or create a snippet. Or if you already have snippets, or if you already have stuff in your novel, if you go into the sidebar, there's the snippets tab, and you can then select new snippet, and a new pop-up snippet appears, which once you've populated it with some information, you can then pin or you can open up the snippet. So where can I use them? So the physical places that snippets can be used in Novelcrafter. So if you're not using AI in your workflow, they're entirely standalone. They're like, think of them as like supplementary documents for your story world. You can, use them to store notes, to-do lists, whatever, regardless of whether or not you use AI. If you want to use AI in your workflow, then you can start adding them as context to chats and attach a snippet. And they allow you to do a little bit, like, it allows you to kind of have a bit more fine control than if you're doing like all your scenes or whatever. You can choose like the snippet that you want to add. So let's go into Novelcrafter. Like if I'm in a chat, you can go to add context here, and alongside, your story or your codex, you can add any snippets, and you can add multiple snippets. And likewise, in the right interface, sorry, my mouse is suddenly going to be a little bit messy because my dominant hand is now being used to pet a dog. You can go add context, and the exact same menu comes up. So this is kind of like the basic where you add them, and obviously this is in the system default prompts. So if you have a custom prompt, you will need to make sure that all the matching component. So if we go into prompts, I think if we go into components, default context, additional context, that's it. So you'll want to make sure that you've added this system component, and to do that, you just copy from there and paste it into your prompt. Okay, so we have a few things. So Michael says, I just dumped stuff here. Now I get to see what they all can do. Nikki adds, I use a snippet to store a core memory from my main character. I could then put it into chats writing from scene beats when I want to the AI to see and use it. Exactly. Like you may have like a huge chapter, and rather than adding that entire chapter, you can put the bit of information that's useful into a snippet and then call that. Like that's a very good way of using it. Michael said, Mitchell, my bad, says he visualized them as special codex items. No, so I would say they're more documents. So if we go on to snippets or codex, so this is my opinion, like this is just how I see it. When I'm debating whether to put something in a snippet or a codex, my primary things are like, if it's one document that's going to stay constant, or like I'll just add to it manually. If I don't want it getting tracked and automatically added, and if it's like a standalone document, then I'll stick it in a snippet. If it's something that I want tracked throughout, like a character that I want then to be able to track or have kind of the mentions pulled up when their name is mentioned. If I want to use progressions on any of the details, and if I want to link multiple entries through relations, then I'll put it in a codex entry. So that's like, so you could have like bits of lore as either a snippet or a codex entry, depending on how you want to do it. Also, it depends on how many codex entries you want. It might be that you'd rather just have like one big lore entry that you can add in with everything. Dank quickly says, what's the best place to paste it? I mean, honestly, for that, I would go to the scene beat completion prompt, the general one, and see where that's been put. So the additional instructions where the additional context is here. So in the system message, I guess. I always base things off the system prompt as like a guideline. Yeah, SA Verit says, I use it as a different version of chapters or scenes. Yeah, it can work in a very similar way to that. Okay, so the first method, I've included a link to the YouTube video or live stream rather of this if you want to look in more detail. But the first way I use snippets, like the primary way I've shown on stream, is through Kitbashing. You generate some text, you pin one of the versions into the sidebar, and then you can add the best of both generations to your work. So say we're in the right interface, and I was working on I think this chapter. So say I've got this chapter here where I've got multiple versions of the same scene. I might want to go and click on the actions menu, create snippet from section. This is added to the side. I'll pin it, and then I might open up the Mistral version and then start adding things in as I go. And that's kind of how kitbashing works. It's kind of putting different bits together. I'm going to delete that for now. But you can kind of take those bits and put them together. And like, yes, we have them in sections here for easy storage within the chapter. But if I had to then scroll down and scroll back up and scroll down and scroll back up for an entire chapter multiple times, that I would lose the will to continue with this. So I find that snippets kind of mean that I go down the document and delete as I go. So then it's kind of like always at the top. But you could do it where you're like highlighting bits, look at that kitbashing video. I think that will help you a lot. But this is kind of like I think if someone was to ask me, what do you use snippets for? This would be the first thing, because it's what I use most often in my day-to-day writing, because I'm doing the writing at the moment. Yeah. Secondly, brain dump organization. You can use a snippet as like a digital whiteboard, notepad, you don't need to worry about like structure or spelling. I mean, we can see that I've got some spelling mistakes in this. Just write down words, phrases, snippets of dialogue, random ideas that come to your head, and just go crazy. I have so many novels that are empty except for a title and one snippet that are a brain dump. And whenever I get an idea for that story, I'll go to my brain dump snippet, I'll add the idea in, and then I'm like, okay, I can move on and come back to it when I'm ready. And it just means then that you've got your story. So like, some of you might not have done this, but absolutely just have spare stories. Like if you've got an idea, make a novel for it. If you come back to it, great. If you don't, that's totally fine. But you've got all your information for that story that's kind of like buzzing around your head, just stored in one place. Like even if it's just the premise, you've got it there. It's a hub of knowledge, and it's so easy to use chat to later organize your notes, or extract if you format things with headings, or just do it manually and add everything into your codex to organize the ideas in your head. I also had there was a live, this isn't linked yet, but there was a live stream I did about this time last year where I was taking a brain dump to story, and that was using a very similar premise to this, where I had just a bunch of notes. I then went into chat and was like, can you help me organize these, kind of make the story coherent? And a snippet just gives you that ability to attach a document and kind of start going. I think even at the time we didn't even have snippets as context because we didn't have the update. So, but I was still using snippets for that then. Research Hub. You can gather all of your research on a specific topic. You can make notes and then add the snippet as context to beats or chat where the information is relevant. So like, for example, here I've got like food and drink, entertainment, creation mythology, a history of Heliopolis. I don't necessarily want all of these in my codex, not because they can't go there, they absolutely could, but I try to keep my codex to the things that are pertinent to the story, like most of the time that's going to come up. This stuff is often like things that I kind of want to keep in mind, but I want to choose when they get brought up. And because because I personally don't have my entire codex as context for the entire, like every single time I generate a beat, it works for me. I know Space likes having kind of keeps everything in the codex, and you can do that, but this is just my way of doing this, and it means I can kind of keep longer form documents, and then if something becomes relevant and I want to mention it and have it as a codex entry, I can do that. I can extract the information just like I would in a chat, but I've got it all in one easy to find place. I mean, these are all blank because I made them for the screenshot. But like, I have a bit of history of Heliopolis. You could add things in and just kind of like give yourself that organization. You can also pin some if you click on like the star icon here for easy access, but you can also search them. So say you might have all of your food and drink. I don't know, let's say I'm going to go and add a strawberry emoji to a couple of these, let's say. And you're like, all of your world building documents have a strawberry. You just type in the strawberry and it's so easy to find them. And like you can use the emojis as part of your organization. And now in the future, when I look at this, I'm going to be wondering why I've got strawberries on here. But it works. It works. But yeah, you can use the research hub in the same way as you would use the codex. I think it just depends on what you prefer in terms of workflow as well. Fuzzy Otter says, I made one snippet after a random brainstorm moment where the AI summarized 14-ish setting premise blurbs for me. Can just pick one when I feel like starting a new story. Exactly. Like you can just, I often do this with the monthly news prompts. If I have an idea from one of them, I'll just open up a story, just add the prompt in and be like, okay, I'll deal with that later. Future me's thing, but I know where it is. It's easy to find. Okay. Cutting room floor. So there's the phrase, kill your darlings. And sometimes maybe we just want to like put them in stasis. So you can take your text and just stick it in a, or if you've got like two versions of a paragraph you really like, and you're like, oh, I don't know which one, you can store it as a snippet or like chapters. If you wanted to, like, instead of, you could archive a chapter, but if you've got the text in a snippet, it's easy to find. You don't have to like scroll through your archive and things like that. And you might find that you really like a chapter and you want to use it as a reader magnet, bonus scenes, that kind of thing. But you've got like a little graveyard, I guess. A graveyard would be another word for it, but a cutting room floor is kind of like, I guess, slightly less lethal, So yeah, I've got in my novel, like my things here, I've got like different samples of text from Kitbashing, original chapter 1. So this is my original. I use it sometimes for style guides. I have up here my sample chapter. This is the original version of a different chapter that I have for mimicking my voice. And you can kind of push things together that way. So you don't need to delete anything, just stick it there. I mean, to be honest, you can even archive snippets, so you could always archive it if you want to just keep it together. Mitchell says, I often call it archives through graveyard. Archives, though graveyard may be closer to the truth. Yeah, it's a graveyard. You could also have like a graveyard act at the bottom of your story to store scenes in if you wanted. So this, which I think is probably something that most that like would feel intuitive, checklists. So I love managing my project within Novelcrafter. So if I've got plot lines that I want to keep in mind as I'm writing, revision notes for a specific chapter as I'm like reading it to edit, I might put them in a snippet. You can also do it if you put it in a codex for revisions or sections, all different ways. You could do like general fixes, a feedback revision plan, comments from people who are looking at it. Like if you are on the specialist plan and you're co-working with someone, it might be that you have a snippet of things that you're both going to do, and you can always then say, we're doing this ideas list. You could then select it all and strike through when you're done. And like lists just help you get things going. Do I have any other lists? Yeah, like to-do lists here. So it just kind of keeps you focused because you can keep it on one side of your workflow. Mitchell says to-do list. I'll use this one for this way for sure. Yeah. Fuzzy says, for a long while I had a backstory scene saved as snippets that helped when lore building, but my snippets got a little bit messy. I think grouping them was on the docket somehow. Scenes here, deep dives there, helper system snippets. It was all a big messy pile. I like doing organization in that way. So you could, either like the emojis, or you might have like, so I go like, these are all plan / and they don't work in the same way that they do, like it does with prompt naming, but by doing everything and having like a name at the top, it just makes it really easy then if you're like searching plan, because if plan is written in the main body of the text, it also comes up, but you can see there like plan and then do so let's clear that. Okay, in-world artifacts. I think this is something that is underutilized, I guess. It's something that you might not have thought of. You can draft and format documents that exist within your story's universe to provide material that you can refer to in your manuscript. So diary entries, letters, say if someone finds it, you have the original letters in a snippet, you can refer to it so the character can refer to lines without you having to specify which lines. So it kind of comes a little bit more naturally. News articles, reports or scientific papers, text messages, email chains. If you're writing nonfiction, dumping articles and snippets, great idea. You could also, so in Space, the book that Space is working on, she has the transcript of a game there, and that gets referred to, and she doesn't tell it use these quotes. It just kind of spices them in, puts them in to the narrative where applicable. I think it's really, and like a lot of this, like you could maybe think of them as lore or objects, but it might be that actually no, I want my in-world artifacts stored somewhere separate so I can like edit them and kind of like, I mean, obviously you can edit a codex, but just play with them in a slightly different way. So I have here this like underground communication leaflet. So I've got the original document and then notes about some handwritten editions and then how they're written, like different pens, the people signing them off. I mean, here's just some story usage notes, but the actual document having everything kind of together and what it looks like as well as the text itself, it just helps give you a bit of a picture of what the document is. And then you can, I can just go on my context, snippets, and go for the underground communications leaflet and just add that in and see how it does. Have any of you done artifacts in your work? I'd be really interested in seeing that, actually. And then finally, the last point I have here. So if any of you have suggestions, absolutely write them down. Cross-book reference. So we get asked a lot, how do I let the AI know about what's already happened in my series? And you can do, like, it doesn't have to include only your work in progress notes. You might include outlines or summaries of past novels, significant scenes, and it kind of gives important context when writing with AI and saves you from clicking out of the novel to find the bits that you need. So it might be that you have your entire like last chapter of the previous book as context when you start writing the second book because you want it to follow on seamlessly. Or you might have a summary of like each act and put them there and add to it as you go along because you don't want every single chapter referred to. It could be that you have events happening in between your two books and you're like, well, this is what happens in between. This is the context, and you can kind of use that as a guide for moving forward. Anything that the AI or yourself, if you're just writing, yourself, anything that you feel should be known as context. And that is not limited to the book that you're working on. If you've got ideas for future books, it might be that you want to add foreshadowing for future events. So it might be that you have the future event as a codex entry, or not as a codex, as a snippet, and you can occasionally refer to it when you want to plant in those clues. That's obviously a little bit more nuanced because you'll have to kind of like double check the AI. But I think it's a really interesting way of getting to kind of like add in those past details, especially because if it's okay, I'm back. So especially if you've got a closed series, you don't want to have oh my god, where am I? If you've got a codex shared through a series, you don't want to end up in a situation where you've got progressions and then you're like, oh, how do I do the progressions and add them in? If you've got everything just in a snippet, you can kind of give it all in one go. So that's one benefit of using that. Let's have a look at the comments. So yeah, Fuzzy Otter says, yeah, I got a whole contract with terms, forfeiture, closure, etc. as a codex. I had it as a snippet, but the adding it to the context without the search bar, like the codex have, is tedious. Let's have a look at that. So yeah, what I do is if I was trying to get yeah, oh that is kind of so if you go on to your snippet and then your mouse is there and you start typing it in, you can get to the snippet, but I can see how that would be really like annoying. So yeah, we'll have to have a request of that, especially and with like scenes and chapters as well. Having the search bar might be useful. Request. Nikki says I have different versions of snippets for different points of view characters where they remember things differently. Helps building in character bias. Yeah, especially if like you have a story where a lot of stuff's happening. You don't necessarily want it to read up past scenes. I guess you could do it where it's staying in one point of view. It kind of really keeps things going. That is true. So Nikki says pin the snippet you want to use at the top and it pings it to the top of the list. Whilst that is true, if you have like 6 snippets or more snippets that you want to use, I guess then you've got the same issue of having to find them. But yeah, pin snippets go to the top. I think as you okay, so that's creation date. Yeah, okay, so I've got through all of that quite quickly. Is there anything that you guys would like me to show you related to snippets, specifically within Novelcrafter? I've kind of given you some ways that you can use them, and I've shown you like where you can go in and add them. So like unlike with codex entries that you can add to a scene, snippets are a little bit more fine controlled where you add them to the beat. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure it is. It feels very intuitive that search for a snippet is planned. Like, if it wasn't, I'd be like, what? Yeah, you can easily do that. Like, I think a lot of the times, some things with snippets and codex entries can be used very similarly. I think for me, the big difference is like you can take a snippet, say, I don't know, say my new details. I can take this and then open the snippet and open it in a full document and then jump between the headings here. And this is what makes the biggest difference for me between a codex and a snippet. Like a codex entry, even if I open it up I can like open it, but it still feels a little bit more like constrained. Whereas like the snippets, you can open up and really just kind of like have a bit more blank space around it, like white space, which I find really helps. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. Hopefully it makes sense. I'm just gonna have a sip of my drink while I wait for comments. But yeah, if there aren't any questions, I think my last slide is just what did we look at? And so in this half hour, we looked at what is a snippet, how can we make a snippet in Novelcrafter, where can we use snippets in our workflow, and then some ways of using them. So kitbashing, brain dumps, research hub, a cutting room floor for all of your like darlings, checklists, in-world artifacts, and cross-book references. Like these last two, I think, if you don't already have these in your workflow, try it. Like I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you're working on like a bigger series. It'll really help. I mean, if you don't already kitbash, please kitbash. It's so much fun as well. But I think through this, like you can see that snippets actually go from the very first thing, or like can be the very first thing you do in a novel, to the very end when you're editing and you have your checklist and you're ticking off that final thing. Like they really can go through your entire writing process, and they're not just limited to the tiny bits and bobs. It, you can put in a lot of information and go to town with the editing. You can use bullets, numerated bullets, bolds, italics, headings. You can have sections within a snippet. You can make your codex entries from a snippet. You can make snippets from your snippet. It really is crazy. And of course, like you can highlight as well. So if you want to like be able to find things, it's really intuitive and very similar to the manuscript in that way. Like, yeah. Okay, so I think on that note, I'm going to head off. I will see you guys on Saturday. What that stream is, I'm not entirely sure. It depends on if any models are released. Often they happen on a Wednesday or a Thursday, so who knows? And yeah, I will see you all soon. Bye.